The morning air in Yellowstone National Park carried the sharp bite of early autumn. A massive grizzly bear moved through the lodgepole pine forest with purposeful strides. His thick brown coat rippled with each step, layers of fat built up for the coming winter pressing against his powerful muscles. He was hunting, not casually browsing for berries or grubs, but actively tracking. His sensitive nose had caught the scent of elk roughly a mile upstream, and hunger drove him forward with singular focus. His name, at least among the park rangers who monitored him, was Magnus. He was one of the largest grizzlies in the Hayden Valley region, weighing close to 700 pounds, standing nearly 9 feet tall when he rose on his hind legs. Scars crisscrossed his muzzle from decades of territorial disputes and hunting struggles. He was experienced, he was dangerous, and he was determined to secure a substantial meal before the snows arrived. Magnus emerged from the tree line onto a wide meadow. The Yellowstone River curved through the landscape ahead, its waters running clear and cold over smooth river stones. Steam rose from hot springs scattered across the valley floor, creating patches of mist that hung low over the grass. He paused, lifting his massive head, testing the wind. The elk scent was stronger here, close, perhaps drinking at the river's edge. He moved forward, his gait shifting to a low crouch as he approached the riverbank. Through the morning mist, he could make out shapes near the water. Dark forms, multiple animals, his predatory instincts sharpened. A herd meant vulnerable young. It meant opportunity. But as Magnus drew closer, the shapes resolved into something unexpected. These weren't elk. The massive shoulders, the curved horns, the sheer bulk of the animals standing in the shallows became unmistakable. American bison. At least 20 of them, ranging from young calves to fully grown bulls that weighed over a ton each. They had come to the river to drink and wade in the cool water, their dark bodies contrasting sharply against the pale stones of the riverbed. Magnus stopped. His hunting instinct warred with caution. Bison were not prey he typically pursued, too large, too aggressive, too willing to fight back. But the scent of vulnerable young still carried on the wind. Several calves stood in the shallows, their smaller frames an obvious target. The grizzly's stomach clenched with hunger. He had burned too many calories tracking elk that had apparently moved on. He needed food. If you've ever faced a choice between retreat and risk, hit the subscribe button and tell us your story. Wildlife biologist Dr. Rebecca Hartman crouched behind a granite outcropping roughly 200 yards upstream. She had been documenting bison behavior patterns for the past 3 weeks, tracking this particular herd as they moved through their seasonal migration routes. Her camera equipment was already set up, recording continuously. When Magnus emerged from the forest, her breath caught. She had observed both species extensively, but never in direct confrontation. This was unprecedented. She watched through her telephoto lens as Magnus began moving along the riverbank, his body low, his eyes fixed on the bison herd. He was circling, looking for an angle of approach. The bison nearest the shore noticed him. A large cow raised her head sharply, water dripping from her muzzle. She released a deep, guttural warning bellow that immediately caught the attention of the entire herd. The response was immediate. The bison didn't scatter. They didn't flee. Instead, they moved into defensive formation. The adults positioned themselves between the calves and the approaching threat, their bodies forming a living wall of muscle and horn. Several of the largest bulls stepped forward from the main group, advancing toward Magnus with deliberate steps, their heads lowered. their tails raised high. Every signal indicated willingness to fight. Magnus stopped his advance. He stood at full height now, easily 9 feet of raw, predatory power. He released a warning roar that echoed across the valley, a sound designed to intimidate and establish dominance. But the bison didn't retreat. The lead bull, a scarred veteran with horns that curved wickedly outward, stamped his front hoof against the river stones. The sound cracked like thunder. Dr. Hartman's hands trembled as she adjusted her lens. "This is going to turn violent," she whispered into her recorder. "The bear is committed. The bison are defending. Neither is backing down. Drop your reactions in the comments if you can feel the tension building." Magnus made his decision. He charged. His massive body exploded into motion, covering the distance to the riverbank in powerful bounds. Water erupted around his paws as he splashed into the shallows, heading directly toward the cluster of calves, still partially protected by the adult formation. The bison bulls responded instantly. The lead bull surged forward to meet the charge head-on, his ton of weight accelerating with surprising speed for such a large animal. They collided with tremendous force. The impact sent spray flying in all directions. Magnus's claws raked across the bull's thick shoulder, but failed to penetrate the dense muscle and fur. The bison's lowered head caught the bear in the chest, the curved horns missing vital organs by inches. Magnus was knocked sideways, his footing lost on the slippery river stones. He twisted mid-fall, his predator's reflexes keeping him from going completely under the water. But before he could regain his stance, 2 more bulls entered the fight. They came from different angles, their strategy coordinated through herd instinct developed over millennia. One bull slammed his shoulder into Magnus's flank, while the bear was still off balance. The second bull used his horns, hooking them toward the grizzly's exposed side. Magnus roared in pain and fury as a horn tip opened a shallow cut along his ribs. The grizzly's survival instinct took over. He lashed out with both front paws, claws fully extended, each one 4 inches of curved death. He caught the second bull across the face, leaving 3 parallel gashes that immediately welled with blood. The bison bellowed, but didn't retreat. Instead, he pressed forward, using his weight to push Magnus deeper into the river. The water was now chest deep on the bear. His advantage in agility was disappearing. Bison were surprisingly capable in water, their bulk providing stability, while Magnus struggled to maintain footing on the uneven riverbed. More bulls were approaching, forming a semicircle, cutting off any escape route except back the way he had come. Dr. Hartman watched in horrified fascination as the battle intensified. "The bear is outmatched," she recorded. "He's fighting 3, now 4 bulls simultaneously. The calves are completely protected. This isn't a hunt anymore. This is survival." Magnus realized his mistake. Pride and hunger had driven him into a fight he couldn't win. A single bison might have retreated. Even 2 might have given ground. But an entire herd defending their young? That was a force even a grizzly couldn't overcome. Blood now mixed with the river water around him, some of it his own. His ribs ached where a horn had struck. His breathing was labored from the exertion and the impacts. He made a final, desperate attempt. Magnus lunged toward the nearest calf, hoping to grab it and retreat before the bulls could stop him. But the calf's mother intercepted, her body blocking his path entirely. She didn't attack, simply stood firm, an immovable barrier between predator and prey. Behind her, the bulls closed in tighter. The lead bull charged again. This time his horn caught Magnus solidly in the shoulder, the impact lifting the bear partially out of the water and throwing him backward. Magnus's back struck a submerged boulder. Pain exploded through his spine. For a terrifying moment, he thought something had broken. Stay with us to see how this life or death struggle ends. Instinct screamed at Magnus. Retreat. Survive. Fight another day. He twisted his body, ignoring the pain, and pushed off the boulder with his hind legs. Instead of continuing toward the calves, he turned and drove himself back toward the shore he had come from. The bulls pursued for several yards, ensuring he was truly leaving, their bellows echoing across the valley. Magnus reached the riverbank and hauled himself out of the water. His fur was matted and bloody. Water streamed from his coat. He paused only long enough to shake violently, sending droplets flying, then continued moving. Not running in panic, but walking steadily, putting distance between himself and the herd. His shoulder throbbed where the horn had connected. His ribs ached, but nothing was broken. He would heal. Behind him, the bison herd gradually relaxed. The bulls maintained their defensive positions for several more minutes, watching the grizzlies retreat. Only when Magnus had disappeared back into the tree line did they begin returning to their calves, touching noses, re-establishing the bonds that had just been tested and proven strong. Dr. Hartman lowered her camera, her entire body shaking with adrenaline despite being safely distant from the confrontation. Incredible, she breathed. The herd's coordination was perfect. They didn't just defend, they drove him off completely. The bear never had a chance once they unified. Magnus moved through the forest with a slower gait now. His pride was wounded as much as his body. The elk scent was completely gone from his awareness, replaced by the overwhelming need to find somewhere safe to rest. He knew a small cave system roughly 2 miles north, near a geothermal area where steam vents kept the ground warm even in winter. He would go there, lick his wounds, rest. Let his body's remarkable healing capacity do its work. By late afternoon, Magnus reached his destination. The cave was exactly as he remembered, a shallow depression beneath an overhang of volcanic rock, warmed by heat, rising from deep within the earth. He circled 3 times before settling onto the stone floor with a heavy sigh. The wound on his ribs had stopped bleeding. The bruising on his shoulder was already beginning to purple beneath his fur. He rested his massive head on his paws. Outside the cave entrance, Yellowstone continued its eternal rhythms. Elk moved through distant meadows, safely beyond his current reach. Hot springs bubbled and steamed. The river flowed cold and clear, carrying no memory of the morning's violence. Nature didn't judge. It simply existed, a constant cycle of hunger and defense, predator and prey, risk and consequence. Magnus's eyes slowly closed. Sleep would come soon, the deep rest that allowed healing. Tomorrow he would hunt again, but more carefully. He would seek easier prey, perhaps fish from the river rather than confronting its defenders. The lesson had been harsh, but clear. Some meals weren't worth the cost. Some fights couldn't be won through strength alone. Dr. Hartman packed her equipment as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. She had hours of footage to review, data to analyze, observations to document. But more than that, she had witnessed something profound. Nature's balance wasn't about the strong defeating the weak. It was about adaptation, community, and knowing when to fight and when to retreat. She took one last look toward the river where the bison herd still grazed peacefully. The calves played in the shallows, supervised by their mothers, utterly unaware of how close danger had come. The bulls maintained their watchful positions, ready to defend again if needed. They were survivors, not through individual power, but through collective strength. This remarkable true story from the heart of Yellowstone reminds us that nature's greatest weapon isn't always teeth or claws. Sometimes it's unity. Sometimes it's the willingness of many to stand together against one. The grizzly bear was powerful, experienced, and hungry. But the bison herd was unified, determined, and protecting something worth fighting for. If this incredible account of survival and strategy moved you, don't miss our next video where we explore another stunning example of nature's balance, proving once again that the wild teaches lessons we can all learn from. Subscribe now to witness more moments where instinct and community shape the outcome of life and death struggles.